Hi everybody, so today we're going to be talking about parathyroid hormone and how it affects your bones to release calcium. So let's take a look at this real quick and do a quick review. So really quick, if we look, I have my I have my thyroid gland, and on the back of the thyroid gland, if you recall, the thyroid gland is actually located right here below your voice box. And on the back of the thyroid gland, you are going to have your parathyroid hormones. Okay, so these are going to be parathyroid hormones. I'm sorry, my parathyroid glands. So I have my parathyroid glands. Now, here's what's going to happen. When I get a decrease in calcium levels, or my calcium levels decrease, it's going to cause the parathyroid glands to secrete parathyroid hormone, which we're going to call PTH, parathyroid hormone, okay? Parathyroid hormone then is going to break down bone. Okay, it's going to break down bone. And when it does, we call this resorption. And I'm sorry, I should say it's going to break down bone to release calcium. And when it does that, we call that resorption, okay? Now, on the opposite side, if I increase my calcium levels, what's going to happen is it's going to decrease the amount of parathyroid hormone being released by the parathyroid glands. So that's going to decrease parathyroid hormone, right? Which will then cause calcium to be deposited in bones. And we're going to talk about these, okay? All right, so we have if my calcium levels go down, right, and it's sensed in the blood, the parathyroid gland is going to increase parathyroid hormone, which is going to break down bone, which is going to increase the amount of calcium that's in my blood that can be used for other areas of the body. If I increase the amount of calcium, my parathyroid hormone is going to be decreased on how much is being secreted, which will lead to calcium being deposited in bone. So we're going to look at these. So before we do though, we're going to talk about three types. There's three types of bone cells. Okay, the first one we're going to talk about is something called osteoblast. So osteoblast, these basically put the calcium into bone. So we're just going to say they make bone. Then what happens is as these make bone, they surround themselves by the bone, right? And eventually they basically surround themselves, and so eventually they become inactive. When these aren't active, they're called osteocytes. So osteocytes are technically osteoblasts, but osteocytes will do some maintenance on the bone. But I'm just going to say they're inactive osteoblast. Okay, and then the last one that we're going to have is called osteoclast. And osteoclasts are going to break down the bone. These are actually going to be doing the resorption. Okay, so that's our osteoclast, okay? So now we're going to look at how this is going to work. So let's erase this real quick. And if we go like this, basically only osteoblast and osteocytes have receptors for parathyroid hormone, okay? So now, there's two types of receptors. One type is going to be called PTH1R, and the other one is PTH2R. Basically, they don't know what role this plays in resorption or in bone. So we're going to basically be concentrating on the PTH1R receptor. And again, that's only going to be on osteoblasts and osteocytes. Osteoclasts do not have receptors for parathyroid hormone. So let's go ahead and take a look now and get started on this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to draw an osteoblast. So let's draw it like this. I'm going to draw this really big. So there's my osteoblast. Okay, this is my osteoblast right there. So now what's going to happen? Let's say my calcium levels have gone down. Well, on my osteoblast, first of all, my parathyroid hormone or gland is going to release parathyroid hormone. And what's going to happen is we have receptors now on the osteoblast. And these receptors are 7 transmembrane receptors, also known as the G-coupled protein receptors. So remember, they're gonna go across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they could be attached to a GQ protein. Okay, I'm not gonna go through the whole process here, but if you recall, this is gonna activate phospholipase C, and phospholipase C is gonna break down PIP2 into IP3 and then diacylglycerol, right? The IP3 then, remember, that's going to come over to basically our mitochondria, our smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So this is our smooth endoplasmic reticulum. And what it's going to do is it's going to bind onto here. And when it does, it causes the calcium that is stored in our smooth endoplasmic reticulum to be released. And we'll talk more about this later on. That's one thing that's gonna happen. The next thing that's gonna happen is not only do we have the GQ protein on here, but we also have a G stimulatory protein on here. So we're gonna go like this, and again, I'm not gonna go through all this. I do have videos on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's my G stimulatory protein. If you recall what G stimulatory protein is going to do, is it's gonna go over and activate adenylyl cyclase, and the adenylyl cyclase is gonna turn ATP into cyclic AMP. That cyclic AMP is gonna cause the formation of something called protein kinase A. And what's gonna happen is our protein kinase A is now going to go down to the nucleus. So here's the nucleus here, right? And inside the nucleus, as you know, we have something called DNA. So here's my DNA, all right? And that's my DNA right there. And now what's going to happen is the protein kinase A is going to bind onto a transcription factor, and it's going to cause the release of several different substances which are going to be used to activate my osteoclast. So remember, I have my osteoblast. It's going to make things that are going to activate or form osteoclast. So the first thing we're going to have is something called macrophage colony stimulating factor. Macrophage colony stimulating factor. So here's what's going to happen with the macrophage stimulating. Well, first let's talk about the other ones. The second one is going to do is something called rankle. All right? And then the third one that we're going to have is interleukin 6. Now, interleukin 6 is going to come out and it's going to activate, it's basically going to activate mature osteoclast. Okay, so it's going to activate mature osteoclast, okay? So now, and then I'll explain these some more in a little bit. One other thing that's going to happen is when these are stimulated, they're actually going to shut down a protein that's being made, and it's something that's called osteoprotegerin, also known as OPG. Okay, so when we want to break down bone, this is going to be decreased. So it's decreased in resorption. Okay, and we'll explain more about this in a minute. It's increased when we want to make bone. Okay, and I put bone formation, I could have put calcium deposition, right? So now, let's take a look at what's going to happen here. So in your body, you make something called stem cells. So I'm going to write these as stem cells right here. These are going to be stem cells. Okay? Now, on my stem cells, I am going to have receptors, and I'll put this right here, for this macrophage colony stimulating factor. And what this is going to do is this is going to come onto here, and it's going to bind onto these stem cells. Okay, I'm only showing it as one, but remember, it's going to be on all these. What that's going to do is it's going to convert these stem cells into osteoclast precursors. Okay, so we have osteoclast precursors. Now, on these osteoclast precursors, I am going to have a receptor, and we're going to call this receptor rank. Okay, so that's my rank receptor. So now, we have this rankle right here, and what's going to happen is this rankle is going to come and it's going to bind onto the osteoclast precursor. So let's move this down just a little bit here. Okay, and it's going to bind onto those osteoclast precursors, right? Now, when this binds onto the osteoclast precursors, let me draw some nuclei in here, right? What's going to happen now is these are going to go on and they are going to become pre-osteoclast. All right, so they're going to go on, they're going to become pre-osteoclast. Let me write this in black so it's easy to read. Okay? So they become pre-osteoclast. Now, my rankle is still going to work on these here. And what it's going to cause these to do is these are all going to fuse together and they are going to become an osteoclast. So they've all fused together, and now my osteoclast is going to have a ruffled border, right? And if you notice, these all have nuclei. So this is going to be one big multinucleated mature osteoclast. Now, I'm only drawing 4, of course it's going to be a lot more than that, right? So this is my osteoclast, right? This is a mature osteoclast. All right, so there's my mature osteoclast. So this is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to draw a bone right here, right? And there's my bone. And so down here, all the white's going to be bone also, okay? So this is all bone right here, all right? So now what's going to happen is this is going to attach to bone. And the way it's going to do that is we actually have a little thing in here, which we're going to call integrin. It's a protein right there. And then on this side, we're going to have something called vitronectin. Right? I'm drawing it here, but also apply on the other side and other places here also. So this is my vitronectin there. And then they're going to bind to each other. Let me just draw it over here real quick too. So we'll go like this. This is my integrin. This is my vitronectin right there. Okay, and now that osteoclast has basically formed a connection with the bone. Okay, so now what's going to happen? Well, inside of here, I am going to have something called a lysosome. And so this is my lysosome. And my lysosome is going to contain proteolytic enzymes. So it's going to contain proteolytic enzymes, right? And what this is going to do when it's activated, this is going to basically fuse with this ruffled border, and it's going to secrete these proteolytic enzymes. So here comes the proteolytic enzymes, and they're going to come down, they're going to start eating away the bone. Now, also inside of here, you're going to have mitochondria, okay? You're also going to have, let me use purple here, you're also going to have some secretory vesicles. Okay? And these are going to do the same thing. They are going to fuse with the cell membrane. Actually, the mitochondria won't. The mitochondria does not. The mitochondria is just going to secrete some acids. So this is going to fuse. This is going to secrete acids. So what they're going to secrete, these two, is they are going to secrete citric acid, and they're going to secrete lactic acid. Okay? And so when these bind, these acids are going to come, and they are also going to start breaking down the bone. Okay? So eventually what's going to happen is this bone is going to be broken down, right? So instead of being like that, this is now going to be broken down like this, okay? Now, the osteoclast will break down bone for about 3 weeks at a time, okay? So it's going to break it down for about 3 weeks. The other thing too is that when we're talking about parathyroid hormone, basically to get the osteoclast activated, parathyroid hormone needs to be secreted persistently. It needs to be continuous. It needs to build up for this to happen. After about 3 weeks, parathyroid hormone starts to go down because our calcium levels start to go up because we're breaking down calcium, right? We're breaking down bone and releasing calcium, right? So now the parathyroid hormone is released intermittently. And when it's secreted intermittently, that's going to activate our osteoblast. So let's take a look at this now. That's the breakdown of bone, okay? Let's take a look at how we make bone. So after this is done, after about 3 weeks now, I am going to have osteoblast come in here, and it's going to start to make new bone. Okay, so now my osteoblast comes into here. And there's several different ways that this is going to happen, okay? The first thing that's going to happen is, like we said before, what happens is inside bone, my osteoblasts surround themselves and they become inactive and they become osteocytes. So let's draw some osteocytes. Okay, let's just use this purple. So I'm going to draw an osteocyte right here. And then I'm going to draw another osteocyte right here. All right? So there's my next osteocyte. Then I'm going to draw another osteocyte right here. Now remember, you have a whole bunch of these. But these are going to be my osteocytes. Now, osteocytes are going to be connected to each other. So I'm going to draw this connection here. Right? And I'm going to draw the connection here. And now, between the osteocyte and the actual bone, so let's have this connection going around this like this. Between the osteocyte and the actual bone, you have something called bone fluid. Okay? And the bone fluid is going to contain calcium. Now, where does it get calcium from? It can get calcium from the blood. It can also get calcium when we saw it broken down earlier by the IP3 when it went into the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. But this is going to contain calcium. So what's going to happen is the calcium is going to go from this area that's in here into the osteocyte. So it goes into the osteocyte. Then between the osteocytes and the osteoblast, we have gap junctions. And so the calcium is then going to come and it's going to go into the osteoblast, right? What the osteoblast is going to do is it's going to pump the calcium out and cause it to be deposited into the bone, and now it starts making bone grow. It's also going to do this with phosphate. I talked about calcium levels going up and down, but actually parathyroid hormone, when it's released, it actually also decreases phosphate levels. So now the calcium is going to be deposited onto the bone, and we're going to start to form bone. So that's one way it does this. By the way, this system here, where all this is connected, this is actually called osteocytic membrane system. And the taking of calcium from the bone fluid and putting it into the osteoblast, that is actually called osteocytic osteolysis. Because don't forget, we said too that osteocytes help maintain bone. So if it's it may break down some of the bone in here and use that calcium to pump out. So it's also known as osteocytic osteolysis. So that's one way that we're going to make bone, right? The second way is my osteoblast also secrete some proteins called sclerostin and Dicoph-1. Okay? Now here's what's going to happen is when we want to make bone, we are going to decrease the amount of sclerostin and Dicoph in the blood. So we're going to decrease this. And by the way, I made a mistake. This isn't coming from the osteoblast. This actually comes from the osteocyte. So I'm going to go like this, and boom, okay? It comes from the osteocytes. They make these. When those decrease, what's going to happen is it's going to lead to osteoblast formation. Okay, so it's going to lead to osteoblast formation, right? So we're going to get more osteoblast. And it's going to decrease osteoblast apoptosis. So that's cell death. Remember, apoptosis is cell death, so it's going to lead to a decrease in apoptosis, okay? So that's the second way that we're going to have bone formation, right? We're going to decrease the amount of sclerostin and Dykov to lead to those things happening. The next way is kind of an indirect way, if we take a look at this real quick. And what's going to happen is as osteoclasts break down bone, what's going to happen is it's going to release insulin growth factor 1, insulin growth factor 2, fibroblast growth factor 2. Okay, it's going to release those, and also transformation growth factor beta. Okay, so it's going to secrete these, and these are going to lead to bone formation because they're growth factors. Okay, now osteoblasts will basically take about 3 months to regrow this bone here. Remember, osteoclast breaks it down for about 3 weeks. Osteoblast could take 3 months or more. It could take several months to reform bone. Okay, so now one other thing that's going to happen, we talked about over here, right? If I go back over here, and we talked about wrinkle, and we said that basically when we want resorption, we decrease the amount of this OPG. And when we want to make bone, we increase the amount of bone formation. So here's what's going to happen. Let's say we want to make bone. What's going to happen is this OPG is going to be released by osteoblast, and then what it does is it basically binds to this wrinkle. So here's my OPG, and my OPG binds to this wrinkle. Now wrinkle is not going to go and basically cause these osteoclast precursors to become pre-osteoclast. So we basically cut this off right here. It's also going to work on pre-osteoclast if they're already made. But we basically cut this off right here. So now those can't be made, and if those can't be made, now my bone's not going to be broken down, and I can actually form more bone because of the fact that my osteoblasts are still working. So that's it for parathyroid hormone. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe button, and we will catch you next time. And again, thanks for watching. I'm going to move this just so you get a better shot at my screen or what I drew. And there you go.